The secret BlackRock doesn't want you to know isn't some hidden investment strategy or insider trading. It's far more fundamental and terrifying. They effectively control the world's largest corporations, not through outright ownership, but through an invisible, undisputed power grab, pulling the strings of nearly every company you interact with, from the food you eat to the technology in your hand, all while remaining largely in the shadows, wielding a silent, crushing influence over the entire global economy. This isn't just about managing $9 trillion in assets. It's about weaponizing those assets to reshape industries, dictate corporate policy, and potentially even alter the fabric of our society, often without a single individual even realizing it's happening. They hold the voting power to sway decisions at almost every major company on the planet, not as traditional owners, but as something far more insidious, universal landlords of capital. You see the brands, the products, the services, but you never see the hand pulling the levers, quietly deciding the future of those very entities. The sheer scale of this invisible empire is staggering, and its implications are already unfolding, right now, as the clock continues to tick. $9 trillion. That number alone is almost incomprehensible. It's more than the entire gross domestic product of Japan, Germany, or the United Kingdom combined. BlackRock isn't just a big bank or investment firm. It is a financial colossus, a sovereign power in its own right, managing money for millions of people, for pension funds, for charitable foundations, and even for governments. This isn't just wealth. It's an unparalleled concentration of financial might. But the truly chilling part, it's not just the sheer volume of money they manage. It's what that colossal pile of capital uniquely allows them to do. It grants them a silent, pervasive authority no other entity can match. Most of us understand active investing. You pick individual stocks, you hope they go up, you try to beat the market. But BlackRock's true, almost unimaginable power lies in something called passive investing. Think colossal index funds and exchange-traded funds, or ETFs. When you buy into a BlackRock S&P 500 ETF, you're not buying shares of Apple or Microsoft directly. You're buying a tiny slice of a giant, diversified basket of thousands of stocks. On the surface, this sounds entirely harmless, even financially intelligent. That, my friend, is the subtle genius, and perhaps the greatest deception, of the illusion. Because so many people, institutions, and even other investment firms channel their savings into these passive vehicles, BlackRock, through its various funds, ends up being the single largest shareholder in almost every major publicly traded company on Earth. Not just an owner but the largest. They routinely hold between 5% and 10% of the shares in giants like Apple, Google, Coca-Cola, Pfizer, Amazon, Microsoft, and even their direct competitors. Imagine one single entity owning a significant, influential chunk of every single player in a colossal global game. What does that do to the nature of the game itself? This unprecedented position transforms BlackRock into what's known as a universal owner. Consider the implications. If they own a piece of both Coke and Pepsi, or Apple and Samsung, or Exxon and Shell, their incentive structure radically shifts. They no longer want one company to ruthlessly crush the other in a brutal competitive fight, driving down prices. Instead, they want the entire industry to thrive in a stable, predictable way. This often translates to less aggressive competition, a general increase in prices over time, and ultimately, a more comfortable, less dynamic market environment for the giants, often at your expense. Now, how do they actually exert this phenomenal control? Through proxy votes. You might initially think, a 5% or 10% isn't enough for a majority. And you'd be right, for a simple majority. But in the real world of widely held public companies, individual shareholders are dispersed, disengaged, and rarely bother to vote their shares. BlackRock, with its massive, consolidated block of votes, becomes the undeniable kingmaker. They effectively dictate who sits on boards, what strategic directions companies take, what major policy shifts are implemented, and even executive compensation. They pull the strings of corporate governance, silently shaping corporate futures. And if that staggering level of influence wasn't enough, BlackRock possesses another, perhaps even more terrifying, secret weapon: Aladdin. This isn't just some internal spreadsheet software. It's a proprietary, ultra-sophisticated risk management system that analyzes trillions of dollars in assets across the globe, processing unfathomable amounts of data every second. Here's the truly chilling part: other massive financial institutions, BlackRock's supposed competitors, actual governments, and central banks, license Aladdin. It has become, essentially, the central operating system for the global financial machine, giving BlackRock unparalleled insight, foresight, and a quiet, almost omnipresent influence over the entire financial ecosystem. Consider their increasingly aggressive push for environmental, social, and governance (ESG) initiatives. On the surface, these sound progressive, even noble. But from BlackRock's perspective as a universal owner, climate change, social inequality, and poor governance are not just moral issues. They are long-term, systemic risks to all their diverse investments. By unilaterally pushing companies towards stringent ESG compliance, BlackRock isn't just being virtuous, they're ensuring the stability and profitability of their vast, sprawling portfolio. This often comes at the cost of short-term returns or competitive agility for individual companies, sometimes even stifling innovation for the sake of systemic control. The insidious nature of this immense power lies precisely in its obfuscation. BlackRock isn't a single, easily identifiable, flesh and blood owner. They operate as a fiduciary, managing money for millions of others: your pension, your mutual funds, your university endowments. This labyrinthine layering of complexity makes it incredibly difficult to pinpoint accountability. Who is truly making the decisions that affect billions? The nameless BlackRock executive, the vast and intricate algorithm of Aladdin, or the pension fund manager whose money is being wielded? It's a question with no easy answer, leaving their colossal influence virtually untraceable to the average person. Look closely at the infamous revolving door between BlackRock and governments across the world. Larry Fink, the CEO, has been repeatedly floated as a potential Treasury Secretary. BlackRock executives routinely slide into key advisory roles, cabinet positions, and regulatory bodies in Washington, D.C., Brussels, and other world capitals. This isn't just about political connections. It's about direct influence on the very regulatory frameworks that are supposed to govern their industry. It's a subtle, yet undeniable, merger of corporate and state power, quietly blurring the lines of governance itself. So, what does this almost omnipotent influence mean for you, the individual, right now? It means less genuine choice in the marketplace. It means stifled innovation, because disruption threatens systemic stability. It means potentially higher prices as competition dwindles, under the watchful eye of a universal owner who prioritizes broad market stability over fierce, consumer-benefiting rivalry. Your pension, your mutual funds, your 401k, they all unknowingly contribute to this colossal, centralized power, fueling an engine that may not have your individual best interests, but rather its own overwhelming systemic interests at heart. The silent hand is already deep in your pocket. This isn't some sudden, dramatic, Hollywood-style takeover. It's a slow, almost imperceptible creep of consolidation. Each quarter, BlackRock's holdings grow, their voting power expands, their influence deepens, like a silent tide rising. It's less like a sudden earthquake, and more like watching a slow-motion avalanche, where each seemingly insignificant snowflake contributes to an unstoppable force. By the time the full weight and implications of this universal ownership are broadly understood, it may already be too late to shift its course. The window for truly understanding and addressing this monumental shift is closing rapidly. Imagine a future where a single, unelected, privately held financial entity holds the strings to almost every major global corporation, dictating their strategies, their priorities, and their very existence. Where the pursuit of profit is subtly, expertly guided not by the raw, chaotic energy of free, market competition, but by the strategic imperatives of one all-seeing financial giant. This is not the plot of some dystopian science fiction novel. This is the quiet, unfolding reality of BlackRock's $9 trillion secret, a reality that is already shaping your life in profound ways you simply cannot see. The full picture, once assembled, is profoundly disturbing. The urgent truth is that BlackRock's power isn't merely economic, it's systemic, political, and increasingly existential. They aren't just investors seeking returns, they are architects, silently redrawing the blueprint of global capitalism itself, piece by painstaking piece. The illusion of consumer choice, the facade of robust competition, these are the subtle sacrifices made on the altar of centralized financial control. The next time you buy a product, invest in a fund, or even hear about a major corporate decision, remember the unseen hand. Remember BlackRock, because understanding this secret, this immense, quiet power, is the absolutely critical first step toward recognizing who truly holds the reins in our increasingly complex and interconnected world. And with every passing second, their silent, overwhelming grasp tightens. The clock is counting down.